Today I'm joined by Andrew Davies, Managing Editor of Taylist Media. Hi Andrew.
Hello.
Tell me a little bit about Taylist and your titles.
Well, Taylist Media has been around for 10 years, just over 10 years now, but we actually came out of a management buyout from a much bigger media company. So the titles that we have have been around, as have I, a very, very long time. So we have KBB Review, which is the B2B title that I guess most people will know. We have Kitchens, Bedrooms and Bathrooms, which is our big glossy consumer title. And we have a third title, which is Studio, which is for residential interior designers and architects. But as I say, we've been around a long time. So KBB Review, I think, is about 35 years this year. KBB is celebrating 30 years this year. And Studio is a much newer title. So we've all been around a very, very long time.
How has the KBB Review in particular changed over the years?
Well, you know, it's funny, when we first started out, it was very much a product book. You know, it'd just be a magazine that talked very much about the new products. We'd have sort of 10-page features on the latest fridges or whatever. But actually, as we've evolved it over the years, we've realised that, you know, we have a very core readership there. It is a magazine for kitchen and bathroom retailers and predominantly independent retailers. So we feel that we are their voice, their forum, their sounding board. And so when we talk about everything from their perspective, including manufacturing and including products, but it's always from their point of view and their perspective. And that's the biggest difference. And as the years go on, we'll get more and more that way, I think.
So you've got your ear close to the ground, Andrew. What's going on in the sector at the moment?
Well, there's short-term and there's long-term things, aren't there? So the short-term things are obviously the sort of macroeconomic aspects of Brexit. And that's affected everybody, mainly to do with consumer confidence. So it's how confident are consumers to part with what are very big ticket sales. But then, of course, there's the short-term things around, you know, as we sit here now, the coronavirus is the main issue of the day, and that anything that stops consumers going into showrooms is always a big deal. And then there are, of course, very long-term issues as well. The main one, of course, is sustainability, which will define this market for 10 years. And in fact, will define this entire world for the next 10 years. That's the big focus. But then there's much bigger ones that are directly affecting the retailers. So right from rates and footfall and the problems of running a shop on the high street, all the way through to the way products are distributed, the way that they're sold on the internet, the way that retailers have to use the internet to their own advantage. These are all very shifting and changing sands that will continue to dominate everything for years.
So is the independent retailer on the high street struggling at the moment, would you say?
You know what? That's a very difficult question to answer because there's no such thing as a typical retailer on the high street. You know, I think, like all retail, the very good ones are absolutely fine. The ones that are struggling are the ones that perhaps struggle with certain elements of their business. I think footfall is difficult, but I think these are big ticket sales, and I think that people want to go and see them. They want to go and touch and feel these products. So there's no sort of cut and dry answer to that question. I get asked that a lot, of course. And the idea that the high street is dead or the high street is fine, it entirely depends on the individual business, I think.
So I follow you on social, Andrew, and you were, in the run-up to the KBB show that's just gone, you were very keen to kind of take a proportionate approach to responding to coronavirus, which was really refreshing.
It's very unlike me to take a proportionate response to anything,
What do you think that this really live issue is going to mean for our industry through 2020?
It's really strange, isn't it? There's a certain amount of panic about it. There's a certain amount of irrationality about it. There's a certain amount of people just simply not looking at the facts. And, you know, or if they have looked at the facts, they can just dismiss them out of hand. You know, hey, you can prove anything with facts, can't you? Right? But the wider term issue with coronavirus, there'll be a short-term issue with people leaving the house, that kind of thing. And there might be some short-term issues with literally people being able to get in a lorry and deliver things. The longer-term issue, of course, is how much it affects supply. Because if you've got all your factories in China shut down for months, well, how are you going to get product to actually sell to people? And that's going to be the biggest issue. And even if you can make it, how are you going to transport it? How are you going to move it across China, let alone across one side of the world to the other? So that's going to be the biggest issue, and that won't hit us until probably approaching the summer, I would think.
Yeah, are you picking up that companies with more diverse supply chains are going to make hay while the sun shines in terms of being insulated from the China suppliers?
Yeah, because we're coming right off the back of Brexit. So there was so much talk about a no-deal Brexit that lots of all the British companies were saying, hey, come and buy British because there won't be any interruption of supply. You had lots of companies based in the UK who bought extra warehouse space and they filled them up in case there was an interruption of supply. So I think one issue has kind of rolled over into the other a little bit. So I haven't heard many people panicking about it, but I think if I was a manufacturer or a distributor and I sourced product or components from China, I'd be quite worried right now.
Do you think that retailers should be thinking about different ways of reaching consumers if footfall is going to be down at the high street and they're already struggling with footfall?
Retailers for years have lived and died by reputation and recommendation. You know, if you talk to retailers and you say, where does your business come from? 99 out of 100 of them will say it's recommendation. But times are changing. Reputation is still obviously incredibly important, and recommendations will still be the biggest driver of things. But where those recommendations come from is what's changing. So the recommendation that your friend will tell you to go to that retailer, that's clearly not going to change. But the recommendation that comes from somebody on social media just tweeting out, anybody know a good bathroom retailer, and that'll come back. And actually, people will trust that. What comes back to that more than they'll trust advertising in some ways. So that's where people have got to change. They have to have their own presence on these things. They have to have their own face, their own personality, so that when those questions do come through, they can immediately answer them and immediately respond to them. But it's something they're very familiar with. It's all recommendations. It's just the channels those recommendations are coming from is slightly changing or diversifying.
You mentioned there about advertising.
Yes, do lots of it. Pays my wages.
What is it for bathroom manufacturers that paid advertising in titles like yours can deliver that other forms of marketing like social marketing can't?
All marketing should be a mix of everything. You know, when I talk to people about this, I never say, hey, spend all your money on print advertising, because that would be daft. But you can't just spend all your money in one place, whatever you do. So yes, you should do print advertising because it's incredibly trusted. It's incredibly immediate. It's in front of you. There's a high level of engagement with it. That's where the real brand building comes in, print advertising, I think. But then you need to then, you know, alongside that, you should do social media, you should do online advertising. You should also do your own, you know, we do a lot of what we call commercial content, which is, you know, advertising content that looks like editorial, because that's really a way to get a discussion going, to get points across. So there should be a diverse mix of everything. And, you know, video, audio, they should all be a part of it now. And where the difficult part for marketing people now is, where do you spend your pots of money? But you shouldn't spend any less, that's for sure.
And you mentioned audio there. Yeah. You've gone into audio, obviously, with the kitchen and bathroom design podcast.
Face for Radio.
What's that experience been like?
Well, I've been I was like a first adopter of podcasts years and years ago. I love the idea of them. And we've dipped our toe into it a couple of times before, but the time hasn't been right. But I think now it's a real zeitgeist thing, podcasts, aren't they? When the BBC brought out their own podcast app, that's when you know. And it's been great. It's such a different medium to talk to people. It's much more personal medium. You're literally in people's ears. Even this nasal scouse drawl is in people's ears. And you just get under the skin of things a little bit more. I love podcasts for one reason, which is, if you're really interested in a subject, no matter what that subject is, kitchen, bathroom design, train spotting, fish keeping, whatever it is, you will listen to somebody talking about it for half an hour. If you find something interesting, you want them to talk about it as much as possible. If you're on the radio, you might have 2 or 3 minutes with your favourite film star or whatever, but we've got half an hour with people just talking about bathroom design or kitchen design. And it's great, and I've learnt a lot actually. After 18 years of writing about it, I've learnt a lot talking to people personally about it.
Yeah, I enjoy the podcast a lot, actually.
Thank you very
what's
much.
in the pipeline?
Have you rated and reviewed us?
I have rated you.
Thank you very much.
5 stars, I think it was.
Of course.
What's coming up in the podcast in the next few months?
Well, we've just finished season 1.
Yeah.
So we'll start season 2 in a couple of weeks' time. So we're going to have a little bit of break to let everyone catch up. And we're looking at things like accessible design. We're looking at things like designing for millennials. And a lot of ones around trend, how you sort of interpret trends. So we've got a few things in the pipeline already, but we'll carry on doing it for as long as people can suffer my voice.
And you're going to mix it up with some other presenters as well.
Yeah, I know. I have to let them in every now and again. But we have all the editors of all the magazines, so it's very much a cross-title product and project. So there's me, But then there's Lindsay, who's the editor of KBB, and there's Rebecca, who's the editor of KBB Review, and there's Elspeth, who's the editor of Studio. So you'll hear all of us across it.
So you're looking pretty fresh considering you just come back from a week at KBB.
Yeah, I know.
What trends did you see there?
I'm only 26.
And what trends did you see at KBB, and what did you think of them?
Well, you know, the headlines around KBB were about whether everyone's going to turn up. I mean, that was the thing. And we do our awards on the Monday nights, and we were, you know, obviously, as you can imagine, the week before we were getting a little bit panicky. Not because we would pull the plug, but whether or not Hilton would pull the plug or the NEC would pull the plug. Luckily, that didn't happen. But as a show, it was really weird because, okay, we could walk around going, you know, colour was a big thing, or open shelving was a big thing, and you know. But for me, the biggest trend was what wasn't there. If you'd have asked me a week before the show what are going to be the big trends, I would have said sustainability will be all over that show, and I barely saw any of it. And I was really, really surprised. I thought there'd be lots of people talking about their green credentials, how their products are going to be sustainable, how they are redesigning things or concept things about new products for the market around sustainability, and there was virtually nothing. There was some bits before anyone writes in, but I thought that would be a real big trend, and it simply wasn't. And I sort of sat there thinking, I wonder why that is. And all I could conclude was because no one's asking for it. And while I think, as I've said, this will define everything for the next 10 years, sustainability, right here and now, manufacturers aren't shouting about it because it's not promoting sales.
See, I'm speaking to manufacturers a lot of the time, and they are doing lots around sustainability at the moment, and certainly it's one of our focuses as an organisation. When are retailers and the merchants going to start asking questions and demanding more?
Well, what's interesting is, particularly around the work that BMA have done for years around this stuff, absolutely, the European water label is obviously the endpoint of a lot of that. But this is a show for retailers talking directly to consumers. If you're in the commercial side of things, which actually drives a lot of R&D in bathrooms, much more than kitchens, you've got to tick those boxes. If you want to get your products into that big development or that hospital or that school or whatever it is, you've got to tick all those sustainability boxes because the legalities of it mean that it's got to be there if you want to get specified. In the retail, where it's actually driven by consumer demand rather than legality, clearly that demand is not yet there. And if you ask me why that is, go and ask me why that is, Tom.
Why is that?
Thanks, Tom. It's because the focus at the moment is on the sustainability of the product. In other words, how recyclable is it, what it's made of. But the truth is, when people buy these things, kitchens or bathrooms, they're not looking to dispose of them within a few months. They're like clothes or whatever it is. They're looking to put a kitchen or bathroom in for 10 years. So the sustainability of the product itself actually isn't at the forefront of the mind. Where I think the industry's yet to really get on board with is how they design products that help people live a sustainable lifestyle day to day. Now, there's some elements of that. Water label's a good one because, of course, it's the amount of water products used. But things like storage of recycling. This is a much bigger issue in the kitchens actually. But storage, disposing of waste, less energy, all these things, they're just not helping people do it. Because if you look at consumer trends, people want to recycle, but where do you put the recycling? Where is it where are the products that help you store your recycling in a way that, okay, not just sorts them out, but it doesn't stink? I've seen some products that have basically allows you to compost your food within the kitchen, which is great. But where is it all? Yeah. Why isn't it being displayed? Why isn't it out there with the retailers? And that's what I think is going to change in the next few years. It's about how you help consumers live sustainable lifestyles.
And there's lots going on around just the incremental changes to the sector, like packaging or the way that goods are transported, which actually all adds to the sustainability credentials of a company. When will the step change come when consumers start asking, well, how is my new bathroom going to be received at home? Is there going to be loads of polystyrene, for instance?
All good designers start their conversation with the consumers by understanding how they live their lives. So you talk to designers, and it can be an hour, half an hour to an hour before they even ask them about products. They start off by saying, how do you live your life? Tell us about your family life. Do you like cooking? Do you like relaxing in the bath? They want to know their lifestyle. So when those questions start coming back with, well, I take sustainability very seriously, or I want to recycle everything, or my kids are complete and total converts to everything getting recycled, that's when it becomes, when the conversations with designers show that consumers include sustainability as part of their everyday life.
So this is a generation thing, which
Probably.
when the next cohort of people with money to dispose on their kitchens or bathrooms, that's when the step change will
Because they haven't grown up knowing any different.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Even, I'm 48 nearly. I can remember a time when you just bought everything and threw it away. But these days, you've got people who are in their 20s who don't know any different. And they've grown up with this. And this is there. See, when I grew up, right, I'm going to get overly philosophical with you now, but I grew up in the 80s. And during the 80s, it was the Cold War. And we had an enemy. There was a total focus on Cold War and nuclear attacks and everything, right? So we had an enemy to think of. The Second World War, we had an enemy to think of. In the 90s, it was terrorism. We had enemies to think of. We were constantly worried about terrorism. Now, the next decade is going to be defined by sustainability, but the trouble is, there's no enemy. We are our own worst enemy. And so we have to kind of look at ourselves and how we live our own lifestyles. It's very difficult. And a lot of the time, the infrastructure is not set up to facilitate that. That's why, how many times do you stand in a supermarket now and hear people go, God, look how much packaging there is on that. And that's only been a couple of years. But that's where design needs to change, because people don't want to buy lots of little things now. They want to buy in bulk. But where do you put it all?
So just turning to a different issue that is on the lips of a lot of my members and not quite sure how to respond to at the moment. For replacement, online is absolutely massive, isn't it? How are retailers responding to that threat of online purchasing over going into the shop?
How much bad language can I use on this video? They hate it. Of course they hate it. A lot of the practices of some of the biggest online retailers are not entirely conducive to a lovely working relationship between them and the showrooms. You'll see a lot of that change. You've already seen a lot of that change. The big online retailers are changing because they source a lot of their product very cheaply, and it's just, as a business model, it's quite unsustainable. But something else will come along behind it. The trouble is, high street retailers haven't done anything with the internet themselves, so the gulf is as much of their own making as it is of the internet dealers' making. But again, you've got a generation of people who don't know any different. It's not going anywhere. Why would it go away? This is just how people shop. We shop that way. I shop that way. It's how you manipulate it for your own ends. But what they object to is, and this is the biggest problem for manufacturers, of course, is that you can buy the same product for different prices for different places. And that's a circle that's never been squared properly.
So we talked a little bit about sustainability and the difficulty in getting that picked up within our marketplace. One of my bugbears is the amount of non-compliant product which is out there in the marketplace. Is that figuring at all on retailers' agenda?
Very little, because retailers make the same assumption that consumers do, that if they can get hold of it, it must be fine, mustn't it?
So how do we change that?
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Look, it's about education, like anything, isn't it? How do we get that message out there? How do we make them check that those products, where do they source that information from? And that's the hardest part. I know you've been doing a lot of work behind that, of course, but it's how do you get that stage in their own process to go, hang on a minute, can I just check that that's fully compliant with everything it should be? What will really change that, the educative bit of that, is working out where the liability sits. And the moment the person who works out that the liability sits with them, suddenly they'll take it very, very seriously.
And that, presumably, when that's figured out, that's going to be big news in your publications.
Yeah, because let's be honest, the liability usually sits either with the retailer or the fitter, if I'm understanding it correctly, not the guy who supplied it in the first place. So this seems slightly unfair, doesn't it? But that's the truth of it. So if you are very liable for something and you're a small business, that's the kind of thing that could finish you off.
Andrew covered lots of ground in this interview, including the Cold War, which was quite unexpected.
Yeah, I like that
one. Anything that you'd like to get out to our members and wider group of stakeholders, just to finish up the interview?
Well, can we say advertise more and subscribe to my podcast? Can we just say that?
That's fine.
And come to the quiz.
We're doing a quiz together at the BMA's conference in October at Carden Park.
I love a quiz, Tom. We know I love a quiz.
Is it going to be as hard as your pointless appearance, or are we going to make it a little easier?
We'll make it a little easier and a bit more interactive. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Andy, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.